are geek-centric, and you can be too. Love ya. Get home safe, guys. Peace.
Welcome to the Geek-Centric Podcast, and welcome to our special Behind the Geeks episode with Barry Hertz, the author of Welcome to the Family, the explosive story behind Fast and Furious. My name is Justin, and if you're joining us for the first time, well, we are Geek-Centric, a podcast covering the world of movies, TV shows, toys, collectibles, gaming, and all things geek-centric. And on today's show, we are joined by someone I have admired for a long time, Mr. Barry Hertz, the award-winning chief film critic for the Globe and Mail, and one of the sharpest voices covering cinema today. Over the past 2 decades, Barry has reviewed thousands of films, interviewed hundreds of filmmakers, and covered the industry from every angle. Festivals, sets, you name it. And now he's written what might be the definitive look at one of Hollywood's most unlikely juggernauts, the Fast and Furious franchise. His new book, Welcome to the Family, the explosive story behind Fast and Furious, the blockbuster that supercharged the world, is an unauthorized deep dive into the wild, stranger than fiction history of a series that went from small street racing drama to a global phenomenon. This thing covers everything from the franchise's chaotic origins to the real-life Yakuza involvement in Tokyo Drift, the battle for screenwriting credit, the death of Paul Walker, the infamous Vin Diesel versus The Rock feud, and even how the series literally ended up in outer space. One of my favorite things about this book is just how it reframes Fast and Furious, not just as a blockbuster series, but as a reflection of pop culture, diversity, global filmmaking, the rise of the mega franchises with interconnected stories, and how it changed the business of entertainment along the way. The book is available now in bookstores, online, on Amazon as a physical copy, an eBook, and as an audiobook narrated by Barry himself. And I have to say, as someone who's been a huge fan of this franchise for a long time and someone who's followed Barry's work for a while, it was genuinely special to sit down with him and talk about why Fast and Furious is a saga worth taking seriously. The behind the scenes battles, the legacy of Paul Walker, the tension that shaped the series, and why this chaotic, heartfelt, sometimes gloriously stupid franchise matters so much to so many. I'm incredibly grateful we got this opportunity, and I think fast film lovers and anyone who just appreciates great storytelling is going to love this conversation. Now, before we jump in, a quick reminder, if you enjoy this conversation, make sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to follow us on our socials. You can find us on Twitter at GeekcentricYT. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at We Are Geekcentric. We've got some incredible episodes out right now, like our spoiler-free reviews for Wake Up Dead Man, A Knives Out Mystery, Disney's Zootopia 2, Rental Family, and Sentimental Value. Plus, we have our latest This Week in Geek episode where we recap the Toronto Game Expo. Nate and Darcy were out and about reporting on behalf of Geekcentric, so go check that episode out. But we also have a ton of interviews available both on podcast feeds as well as on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/geekcentric, like our most recent interviews for Stranger Things 5 Volume 1, our spoiler interviews with the Duffer Brothers, the creators and directors and writers behind the series, and our conversation with Sadie Sink and Jamie Campbell Bower. So be sure to check those out. All right, let's get into it. Here is my conversation with Barry Hertz. Enjoy. Barry Hertz, welcome to the Geek-Centric Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me.
I've been stoked to talk to you. It's been long overdue. I've been taking my time reading this book, soaking it all in. I am a huge fan of this franchise and have been for a long time, for better and for worse, I will say. It's definitely evolved. And I think the book, Welcome to the Family, definitely captures that. And I think one of my favorite lines comes right off the top. If the Fast films are, as some detractors note, gloriously stupid, they are also stupidly glorious. And I think that's just such a perfect encapsulation of what this franchise is. Yeah, this book was absolutely fantastic. And now it's out. It's out
Yeah,
officially. You know,
it's
people
in the
can go
world.
buy it. It's in the world. People are reading it. They're pulling quotes from it. You know, they're sharing their reactions online. How are you feeling seeing, Welcome to the Family in readers' hands and watching all the responses roll in?
Yeah, it's a weird feeling, like, very honestly. Like, I'm so used to being on the other side. I'm so used to being on your side, right?
Hmm.
Like, consuming all kinds of culture and then, critiquing it and commenting it and sharing it. So it's weird to see others do the same.
Hmm.
And I'm still trying to get used to it. And yeah, it existed as like more abstract thing. Like,
Hmm.
it was a document on my computer for so long, and now it has escaped containment, and it's out in the world. So yeah, but the response so far has been really great, really heartening. And I did write this as much for the fans, of the franchise, of which I, of course, consider myself one of the top,
Hmm.
and for people who've never been exposed to the franchise before, or have kind of written it off or ignored it, or kind of just like, oh, Fast and Furious, that sounds stupid, and there's no glorious element to it. And I wanted to bring the glory to that, to the whole thing. So it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's so great is that you bring it all, right? Like you bring the glory, you bring the messiness, you bring all of the behind the scenes. And like, so many people will go to these movies and just watch them for what they are, entertainment. But
Right.
this really does open up all of the details of what goes on behind the scenes and how these movies have come to be. And as you said, it's kind of like the big franchise in competition with things like the MCU or the DCU and some of the other Universal tentpole franchises that they have. That's massive, and it kind of happened by accident in a lot of ways. And like you mentioned, though, you've covered Hollywood for years. You're a critic for Globe and Mail for quite some time, and given your experience in that realm, what made Fast and Furious, of all the franchises, the story that you wanted to like really kind of delve into and understand more of?
I think it was because, when we talk about those other like long-term franchises that are still around and very successful in Hollywood, your Jurassic Parks, your Mission Impossible, DC, Marvel, like, those are there's interesting stories to be told within those. But at the same
Mhm.
time, for like, James Bond or DC or Marvel, it's such a mutable thing. Like, you can just kind of slot certain, you can recast a Batman, and you can
Correct.
recast a Spider-Man, and we've had like five Jokers like over the past 10 years. But the Fast films is very self-contained. It is that family.
Mhm.
It is those characters, and we're not necessarily there to see, a dinosaur or somebody under a cape. We're there to see Dominic Toretto, and we're there to see Letty Ortiz. Like,
Yeah.
and we've grown up with those characters, but also the actors who have embodied them.
Mhm.
And so I thought that was something that set it apart. And at the same time, the evolution of the films has been so crazy. Like, Marvel, obviously has gotten, bigger with like Endgame and stuff like that, and things tie into each other. But it was always, Iron Man was a superhero epic. Like, it was big, and it felt big from the get go. And same with any of the DC movies, same with any of the James Bond movies, same with the Mission Impossible movies. But Fast was started off as like a very small, relatively grounded, like, street racing thriller.
Yeah.
And then over the years, it just metastasized into something huge and
Yeah.
bigger, until they were literally in outer space. So I thought that that evolution, and that like consistent doubling down, there was
Mhm.
something very compelling about that. And I thought it also kind of spoke to the general arc of like how Hollywood treats its tentpoles and big budget filmmaking over the past 25 years. Like, the history of Fast is really the history of Hollywood for the past quarter century.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And I love how you frame it. It doesn't have the James Bonds, the Batman, the Spider-Mans. It's actually built from the ground up. humble beginnings in a lot of
Very
ways,
humble.
right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
in the way it was. But with your research and your interviews, you kind of unravel a lot of like the sort of messiness, like I was referencing before, with behind the scenes of some of it. While you were researching it, was there any specific moment that really stood out to you as like, wow, like this was a big achievement?
I mean, I think, it just kind of hits home just like how many million different little things have to go right for any movie to make it to the other
Hmm.
side, like from development to actual, like, getting out there in the world. It's crazy. Just like all the things that fall apart along the way, and you have to pick up the pieces if you're lucky enough to do that. And I think for Fast in particular, like one of the kind of inflection points was when they were doing three, or when they were thinking of doing three.
Hmm.
So like they were kind of starting from scratch again, right? Because Vin Diesel did the first one, then didn't come back for the second one. Paul Walker did the second one, but then wasn't coming back for the third one. So they're kind of left with nothing other than the concept of like cars going fast, and what do they want to do with it? And there were, very early brief discussions about making it a direct to DVD thing and like downscaling it, along the lines of what Universal was doing at the time with their like Bring It On sequels and their
Correct.
American Pie sequels, where
Yeah.
like
They were
Eugene
straight to
Levy
DVD. Yeah,
is
yeah.
like straight like no kids, you can have a pie and Eugene Levy. That's all the budget we have. Um, and I mean, so it was very much like it could have ended then and there, or it could have gone to DVD and gone down a DVD hole or just been forgotten or whatever. But they decided, to bring in Justin Lin and to give him quite a large amount of money and relative creative freedom. And he did something I think, a lot of people would agree is pretty remarkable and has only aged better. I
Hmm.
feel like that's
Yes.
that's Tokyo Drift. In its initial reception, wasn't kind of taken as seriously or interestingly as it is today. And that one, changed the course of everything. And they convinced Vin Diesel to come back and film that, last minute cameo at the end, which tied everything together in a neat little bow. And then they were like, off to the races, not to
Yeah.
use too many car puns.
No, please, all the car puns. I'm down for it. Yeah, I think Tokyo Drift was the shift, right? As you described, it was the change that the franchise sort of needed to show that there's a broader culture outside of the existing culture of the American car culture. Yeah, I thought that really did work, and it did kind of play like a straight to DVD. It did feel like it could be, but I'm glad it actually got a theatrical release. I loved that movie upon its first release. I loved number two. I the definitely gets that glow up after the first
Yeah,
movie's
yeah.
success, and
Hmm.
where it's like there's a lot more flashiness. I think you talk about a little bit that from like one to two, like the
Totally.
flashiness and the sort of the vibrancy of it. And Tokyo Drift definitely continued that. I love the structure of the book. Each chapter is digging into each film. After spending so much time inside of each of these films and talking about them and writing each chapter, did your opinion of any of the films change? Like, do you see them differently now, knowing or learning more about behind the scenes, maybe for better or for worse?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely. I think my opinions changed a lot. It changed on the series as a whole.
Hmm.
I went into it obviously as a fan,
Correct.
because I wouldn't, spend so much time writing about something that I didn't like or wasn't interested in. But I feel, I gained, yeah, that much more renewed appreciation for Tokyo Drift. I think that I know the space moment in F9 is a very polarizing subject.
Hmm.
And more people would fall on the line of that was not good versus versus I enjoyed that. And I was also on the fence like going into it, but then I talked with a lot of people who were involved and what that moment was all about and how they constructed it, and then I came around to it. So I've come around to the space moment in F9 as actually being quite poignant,
Hmm.
in terms of a comment on the series' own evolution.
Yeah.
So that kind of changed. And then, I did go into it not loving F8, Fate of
Hmm.
the Furious, which
Yeah.
again I think is a kind of an opinion shared by a lot of Fast fans.
Yeah.
And listening to how that kind of came together and what was involved and what didn't come together, I was like, you know what, my opinion is confirmed, or even I even dislike it more.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's great things about all the movies, of
For sure.
course, but yeah, I definitely have a ranking, and I'm sorry, but F8 is right at the bottom for me.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I think, for me as a fan, I really love from 1 to 7. I think that
Hmm.
they stayed pretty consistent, and bringing back the cast in 4, and then 5 was
Yeah,
epic, right? And
yeah. I
6.
mean, five is the best,
Yes, and I loved your
far and
chapter on
away.
5. I was so excited to read that because it was my favorite of them, and it
Mm,
reinvented the franchise, and I loved how you talked about how it did the MCU thing before. I never looked at it that way, and literally before the MCU actually did the Avengers, and I didn't even clock the time frame. I thought they were in and around, but it's crazy to see that, Fast did it first before
yeah,
the
yeah,
MCU did, and not
yeah.
only that, like, the fact that I always looked at it as like, oh, this is their Ocean's 11 thing, and you
Totally.
reference
Yeah.
it a little bit in there, but really it is about just bringing all of the different stories that they've already told with all these characters into one story, like an MCU thing. And I was like, damn, that's so true. I never even thought of that. So I definitely reframed how I looked at those films,
Hmm.
in regards to just like, especially the time of when they're released, and the, as you said, like the point that it had at that time in regards to like what it was doing that might be different in the
Yeah,
franchise, right? Or
yeah,
might be
yeah.
different within the industry. So, but this book opens in the prologue with you describing the, I guess it was the Fast 10 premiere, if I'm not
Fast
mistaken.
10 premiere. Yeah,
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 with
yeah.
at the Coliseum, and Vin Diesel there, he's doing his thing. Why did you want to start there as the entry point for kind of like getting the readers into it?
I guess because I thought that was like another kind of crucial moment in the history and the evolution, and I felt it was important to start us as close to the present as we could be, just to kind of situate ourselves
Hmm.
in where Fast is today, which is on the precipice of major change, or no change at all. I don't know. Like it was a big question mark, because initially when I started working on this book and when I pitched it, I was like, okay, if I can like do this in this window of time, I will have it out in time for Fast X Part Two, or
Hmm.
the sequel, because it was it was getting like, it had come out in the summer of 2023, and it ended on a huge cliffhanger, and it seemed like the next one should be just around the corner, kind of keeping with the usual release date patterns of these films. And then I was working on it. I was like, nothing's happening. When's the sequel going to get it released? And so I thought, well, okay, like instead of worrying about that, the ambiguity is kind of the story.
Yeah.
So on the Fast red carpet, on the Fast X red carpet, back in the summer of 2023, outside the Coliseum, which is like such a ridiculous place
So
in and of itself to
yeah.
have this premiere, and it just like shows like just the empire that they are building, but also the threat of that empire, burning to the
Being
ground.
destroyed. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it can burn in a day.
Yeah.
Where Vin Diesel is promising not only there's a sequel to this movie, but there's going to be two sequels to this movie. It was just like, okay, well, this kind of really underlines the ambitions of Diesel, the cold reality that these films are kind of reckoning with, and the fan community, which kind of just like has been along for the ride for
Hmm.
so long, and is kind of at this point like looking for some kind of capstone or resolution or something like that. So I thought, okay, let's situate it where Fast is today, and then we can rewind and
Yeah.
see how we got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of not really, but like a sort of play on like the chronology of the series itself, which is not linear.
Exactly.
We
Right.
Tokyo Drift is technically the seventh film.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
It's
yeah,
technically the seventh. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. In the whole franchise. But I loved that you started there, because I think exactly like you described, like it is the pinnacle. You have the Fast team doing a red carpet world global premiere outside of the Coliseum. And I love the comparison there that you had with like empire to empire, and really at the foreshadowing of like potentially the demise of this empire and the
yeah,
structure. And they've built this thing collectively. That the one thing that was really nice is them all talking about how, that it's something that they really take pride in. But yeah, Vin Diesel kind of, being a Dwayne, and, talking ahead of what anything else has been announced, or trying to get ahead of it and self promote in some ways. That was a big moment. So I love that you started there, only to be like, this is where we're at currently. And this
Mhm.
is how big this thing is, to the point of where they're outside the Coliseum and Vin Diesel is just talking about the next 3 movies that he wants to make, or 2
Yeah,
movies
yeah.
that he wants to do.
Yeah,
Right. And
it's like it's a tricky thing writing a book about a franchise in progress.
mhm,
Like you could write, of course, about all the Star Wars movies that have already like come and gone, like back in the '70s, or you can write a book about The Godfather or something like that. But to do something that has not ended and is in a very fluid state is a tricky thing.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. What I was also really surprised about the book is the origins of the Fast and the Furious, like the original. Like, it was a tiny magazine story,
Right? Yeah.
and from like a street, I think it was a New York street racing magazine, if I'm not mistaken. And like, how surprised were you by just how accidental this franchise was? Like, it just kind of like started as like a little article, and now it's like this huge thing.
I know, yeah. So I mean, that was like one of the kind of pieces of trivia I've always kind of carried with me as a card carrying fast fandom member is that I knew that there was this like tiny magazine article upon which the whole enterprise was based, and it was published in Vibe magazine in I believe 1999,
Hmm.
maybe it's 98. By a young New York City crime reporter named Kenneth Lee. And he kind of stumbled upon these underground street racers in Queens who were gathering together on the weekends and showing off their rides and everything like that. And he thought it was just like a really cool subculture to explore.
Hmm.
And he wrote a big feature for Vibe, and that was nice. And it got the attention of Universal Pictures down in LA that wanted to option it. It was looking for kind of fresh material, youth driven stories. And I talked with Ken, and Ken is still a working journalist in New York. He works for Reuters now. He's like, I think their global tech editor, which is kind of amazing. Like, he's still in New York City journalism, so proves his bona fides there. um, and he got an option on it. Like, they paid him for the option, and there was a point where they said, do you want to write the script? And that didn't quite work out. um, but since then, his name has, and any trace of that article has been totally wiped away from the
Hmm.
franchise. Like,
Yeah.
there's a very very tiny credit at the end of the first film that says based on a Vibe magazine article, or even a magazine article by Kenneth Lee, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that's how it goes, unfortunately.
It's
But
a it is, it's the industry, right? I feel bad for him because obviously the franchise is blown up, but like, I think it's gone beyond that one movie, obviously, right?
totally,
And
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the roots of that article are certainly very present in the first film, but there's obviously nothing in that article about Miami or about Luke Hobbs or stealing a vault through the streets of
Yeah.
Rio.
Right.
It has very much taken on its own life.
For sure, for sure. The one thing that that you really highlighted, and again, just not even thinking about it way back when the first one came out, when the Fast and Furious came out, is the representation, the culture, and the global impact
Right? Yeah, yeah.
that film had. Like, why do you think it that film got it right before anyone else did? Like, no, like, just everyone was really struggling, and even Michelle Rodriguez talking so fond about this idea of like, being a part of a movie that allowed her to see people like herself in it.
Hmm, hmm.
Again, why do you think it was able to do that so well? Is because it was so low on the radar?
I think as it was so low, like no one was really paying attention to it. Like a kind of a running theme that Rob Cohen, the director of the first film, told me was like we were able to kind of do some weird or unusual things because no one really cared.
Yeah.
We were such a small thing. They were, the first film cost I think like $38 million to make.
Yep.
Um, not a small amount, but not anything near the size of it would be, or the size of other, big tent poles at that time. So they were kind of left to their own devices in a way. And it was just, I think, through a combination of Rob Cohen wanting to be authentic, screenwriter David Ayer really wanting to represent what Southern California car culture was like at
Yeah.
that time, which was very diverse. It was, Asian American kids and Black kids and Hispanic kids just like getting together and showing off their rides. So they wanted to cast it accordingly. and they lucked out with their performers. Like, yeah, Paul was like the white guy at the center of it,
Sure.
but then you had Michelle Rodriguez, and you had Vin, who was ethnically ambiguous and
I
such a
loved how you called that out, because he's like,
yeah.
he could be anything.
He
He could
could
be
be anything.
Spanish.
You could see yourself in him no matter what. And
Yeah,
he's always
absolutely.
kind of he's never pinpointed himself down.
Right.
So in the Toretto family tree, yeah, eventually like has like all these crazy branches. Like you got family in like Cuba or whatever.
Right.
So
It's true. I forget.
so they did that, and they weren't necessarily trying to like do anything um like that was boundary breaking. It was what it was.
Hmm.
And then they found out that, like, oh wow, like there's a whole bunch of audiences who really glommed onto this because they had never seen it like that. They had never seen their stories or themselves on screen in such a way. And Universal, being no dummy, was like, oh well, we can market this heavily, and we can actually develop this a little bit more explicitly. And as we see, like as the franchises grow and grow, you keep adding more actors of color, directors of color. Like
Yes.
beside Rob Cohen, who did the first one, and Louis Leterrier, who did the 10th,
Hmm.
and was also, of course, like parachuted in. All the films have been directed by men of color, which is pretty unusual for like such a massive franchise like that. I mean, like we can like John Singleton on number two, and he was very exploring different perspectives in areas of Miami than we were used to seeing. And then Justin Lin, of course, did like his whole thing. I mean, Justin really was the architect of how it got to where it was.
Right.
But James Wan, number seven, F. Gary Gray, number eight.
Yeah.
So it is.
Oh yeah, F. Gary did that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it is pretty remarkable, the evolution that they've done, and it has been so natural. And it's also because in the films themselves, like I'll just say quickly, like it's never been explicit. Like it's never
No.
been like something that's been pushed in your face in terms of
Yes.
diversity or authenticity. It's just
Yes.
like is
Yeah.
what it is. Is it's like it doesn't matter the color of your skin. It's like, can you drive this car? Like that's what it is. And it speaks to, I think, Vin Diesel's larger philosophy. Like his production company is called One Race, and you can use that in a couple different ways.
Interesting. I didn't think of that. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. Like the one thing that stood out to me, especially as you talked about it, is obviously it being the first, and because it was so low on the radar. This was meant. The first one was meant to be a riff on Point Break that was like so low on the radar. It was just supposed to be like sort of popcorn fuzz, and it just ended up being what it was. And as you said, it allowed them to kind of integrate diversity into the film that really helped it, right? Like that really helped it carry and reach larger audiences. And to your point, it's never been forced. Whereas I think,
Mhm.
again, I'm all for culture and diversity. I think it's a beautiful thing, especially given being of someone of a different origin. It's really great to see that. I do think that some studios and some desires are more driven by wanting to check a box versus like actual
Yes.
authenticity. And
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
audiences are growing to understand that. So it's really nice to see that like something like the Fast and Furious franchise has it's just built into their DNA from the beginning, and it's just
Totally.
kind of followed its way through. And the note about the directors. So, well, the one thing I really did admire about as you were talking about each of these movies is just everything seems to be held by a sense of chaos. But I guess that's just production life. Like that's that
Mm.
like a whole behind the scenes like you talk about some different stuff, like there's egos, there's creative battles, there's even maybe some walk-offs, like out of all of the things that you kind of learned, was there anything like you just like, wow, I couldn't believe that moment happened, or that happened with this movie at any point while you were researching?
I mean, Justin Lin leaving Fast
I was
X. I
gonna
mean, we
ask, yeah.
all know it happened because we read about it at the
Yeah.
time. But that's just such a unprecedented situation of a director throwing up their hands and walking away from a film that they're working on, and not only a film that they're working on, but like
Rebuilt.
they've rebuilt and they've been spent most of their professional life working
Yeah.
on. So to
Yeah,
do that, I thought was like so indicative of just like huge frustration.
for
And
sure.
I guess kind of the overarching idea or like truth that I kind of found out was like, as ridiculous as we think like Hollywood is, and we see all the kind of funny stories like played out in shows like The Studio from
Yeah.
Seth Rogen, and just like ridiculous and absurd things. And you know what? It's true. It's actually much more ridiculous than you can imagine.
Hmm.
The ego battles and the creative battles, and it can be so absurd, that it is a miracle that anything ever gets made.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of like the other point I was trying to get across in the book, is that we know all the top line people who have made these films. Like, we
Hmm.
know Vin and we know Dwayne. Like, we know their names, but there's so many others, like, on the ground floor of this stuff, who are doing the hard blood, sweat, and tears of getting these things out the door. And whether
Yeah.
that's the writers, that's the producers, it's
Producer.
the
Yeah.
development executives, or the stunt people, especially.
Yes.
I mean, hearing their stories, I think, was like a huge, huge eye opener, situations for me.
Yeah, I appreciated hearing about the I can't remember his name, but the gentleman who drove the bus in 5 that they rolled numerous
Oh yeah,
times, and
Corey Eubanks.
Corey Eubanks, and to hear like the level of fear that he had, and like in the moment, and like just begging for the thing to stop rolling, and so like he could get out, and he was like thinking of all the millions of ways that this could go wrong, it could ignite, it could blow up, and he's in there. They put their lives on the line for us as entertainment to appreciate and to feel a sense of like, there's an authenticity, and it's not just CGI, it's not visual effects, it's not miniatures, right? It's real things. And like, it's pretty wild that they put themselves in that danger, and just to hear that perspective in that moment, because that was like, they filmed that last, right? And then, but it was at the
Yeah,
top of the movie,
yeah,
right? Because it was the opening. Yeah.
that was the last thing they really filmed for 5. And it was because, from the people who told me, it's basically like the studio was so impressed with what the team had been doing on the film, and they'd seen what they had accomplished already, that they're like, well, is there like one more set piece you want to get in there? And they were like, yeah, I want to roll this prison bus, because originally, it was gonna open just with like news footage of
Oh,
like
right.
a
Correct.
prison break, and
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
this, they broke, because we see that
At the end
teased
of
at the end
4.
of
Yeah.
4.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of natural. Okay, well, that happened off screen, and then yeah, so they did that. And I mean, yeah, they kind of made history there. And it's so funny when you watch the movie. Like, it's not a very long moment. Like, it is crazy, but it's not long, and it is just one of like 7 or 8 major set pieces that are
Yeah.
there. But I think it adds so much more.
It definitely does, and it feels like that continuity from 4 to 5, like that, like instant connection to it. Yeah, I was really, I had a question for you about Justin Lin, and him leaving Fast 10, just 3 days. It was quite the turning point. For me, at least, it highlighted that there was obviously something deeper going on. But for you, like, when you think about it, what did it reveal to you about this franchise, and from a behind the scenes perspective?
I think it just reveals that, like, the pressure that filmmakers and actors, like all the creative people who make these movies, the pressure that is placed upon them for these productions is immense. I mean, Justin in particular, everybody who I talked to who'd worked with him, like, described him as like a superhuman kind of filmmaker, in that his work ethic was astounding. He was, when shooting is going on, he's sleeping like 3 hours a day. He's just in charge of so many moving parts. And when you're making a decision, and you're, as a director on one of these films, you're making, I don't know, dozens if not hundreds of decisions a day, and some of them are have the potential to cost tens of millions of dollars. Or you could, make the wrong decision and cost, even more. That it is a strain on people's health, and their well-being. And I think, the understanding that I had from talking to everybody who was, involved in the Fast X situation, was just the tensions and the creative disagreements, between him and Vin Diesel became just so great that, for his own personal well-being, he was like, I have
Yeah.
to throw up my
Yeah.
hands and I have to walk away. And it could not have been an easy decision. But sometimes you have to make those very hard decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember it was a few days before that was announced. Vin posted like him on selfie cam with
Right. Yes.
Justin, and Justin just like people went back and watched it after the announcement and were just like, yeah, he looks like he's in he's in hell right now, and he's just in an awful place. So it's probably better for his mental health to just get out of it. And to your point, you know, when you have so much pressure from like a studio side, but also from Vin Diesel, who feels very hands on with this whole thing, like, you know, he's
Yes.
really trying to like keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, which is kind of ironic because he didn't want to have anything to do with 2 or 3, but then suddenly decided to come back and be like, well, it's going to be the franchise that I'm going to make my own, right? So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, it's yes, that ego thing kind of complex
I,
comes into place.
I mean, and it's also important to know, like, you know, when he agreed to come back for that cameo in 3, he also negotiated producing powers
Hmm.
for the franchise going forward. So, unlike a typical like leading man, like, you know, let's just pull out somebody in a hat here, like Chris Pratt in the Jurassic
Sure.
World movies, right? Like he's there and he's a big important part of it, but he's not necessarily has like the creative control
Hmm.
that a producer would also have, who is also starring in it. So like Vin was very canny in making that part of his you know, package of coming back, so that, you know, these would become the Dominic Toretto kind of
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we also forget that, you know, the first Fast was developed as a Star Wars vehicle for Paul Walker, not
Hmm.
for Vin. Vin came
Right.
in after
Yep.
most of the elements had been assembled. So,
Hmm.
um, so yeah, so it, you know, he does take these movies very seriously. He is very hands on, you know, to the point of micromanaging. Some might say, and you know, sometimes, you know, the you meet a brick wall,
Yeah.
or
And
you
his
meet a
name's Vin Diesel.
you need yeah, yeah, or a man who is as strong or imposing as a brick wall.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to come back to Vin in 1 second. I did want to ask you just as a quick highlight question here. You know, in the book, you did talk about you approached Universal about, you told them that you were writing. You had lunch with one of the representatives. They obviously declined to take out part in it, you know, while it was going on. Now that the book is out, have you heard from the studio at all? Have you shared a copy with that representative, or is it been silent still?
No, it's still been radio silence.
Okay.
I yeah, so I like the in terms of like the timeline, like I kind of pitched and sold the book without any guarantee of access.
Hmm.
I said, you know, I haven't talked with anybody at Universal about this, but I feel there's a great book in here, and I feel people will talk to me eventually or in some
Hmm.
fashion. And so I started work on the book, and you know, I immediately reached out to Universal and I said, hey, I'm doing this book. I'd really love, you know, participation or
Hmm.
access or anything you can do. And in the meantime, I kind of kept on like reaching out to other people and like trying to book as many interviews as I can. And then finally, like about, yeah, I think I met with them when I was in LA in late March of 2024. So I'd been doing some work on the book for maybe about like 2 months or something like that. And, you know, I told them my intentions. I told what I wanted to do. I told them who I had talked to already. And they were like, well, okay, good for you, but we don't really want to have anything to do with this. It's an ongoing franchise. We don't really open up ourselves to journalists or authors. And I was like, okay, thanks. I was like, you know, but if anything changes, like I'd still love to talk with, you know, any executives or people down the line. And, you know, there just was nothing. And eventually after you know, I reckoned with the fact that that wasn't going to happen and they weren't going to help make any connections for me. I was on my own and I was fine with that. And I knew that was a possibility. So I just, you know, went forth. And then at the, you know, toward the end of the process, when I was starting to write it and I was starting to compile everything, I got back in touch with them and I was like, hey, have you changed your mind? And here's like a bunch of questions I have of things people have told me and things I've discovered. Do you have any reply to that? Like, if you can get back to me in like, you know, 3 weeks or a month, that would be great. And nothing, you know, followed up, nothing. So they have known what, you know, generally what material would be in the book,
Yeah.
but because of that long list of questions I had sent them, but
Hmm.
no, it's been nothing since.
And
So
yeah, and you conducted 170 interviews, as it was said in the thing, and these are all interviews that you gathered yourself, through.
Yep,
I'm imagining you use.
independently sourced.
Yeah, you used IMDb Pro as what I've heard.
IMDb Pro is a journalist's best friend, and but that will only take you so far.
Correct.
So yeah, I sent, I was scouring the internet for contact information, sending out tons of Instagram DMs, Twitter DMs, LinkedIn requests.
Wow.
It I'd probably sent more emails and message requests for this book than I have, I don't know,
Anything else?
cumulatively in my 20-year journalism career.
Yeah,
I felt
exactly.
like so I just like truly like hundreds of thousands and thousands,
Wait, you're chasing the
and
story.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, the great thing about writing a book about the fast films is there's so many films, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's 10, 11 if we count Hobbs and Shaw, and each one of those films, hundreds of people have worked on them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you kind of just look at it as an odds game, you're going to be able to find some of those people, and
Yeah.
some of those people you find are going to be willing to talk with you and have interesting things to say.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was through a lot of research and tenacity, I suppose. But
Tenacity for sure. I love that you chase down some of these, these behind the scenes, production people, like you mentioned the stunt coordinator from Five, but also I'm a video editor, or I work in video editing outside of all of this, and hearing the stories of some of these editors working on these films in such tight timelines for post-production,
right,
where it was like, I think it was like someone said I think one of them was like 12 weeks or maybe less, and like the editors are doing like 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. and I was just like, for like 5 days straight, and like it was like you get fat because you see you had such a bad day and you just go home and you just eat a
yeah,
bunch of
yeah,
chocolate. And I was like, I could like totally imagine that would have been like hellacious, right? But it really does highlight the studio's like necessity to push these teams to like really execute on a project, and what
yeah.
it does cost mentally and physically on the people that are involved.
Yeah, I mean, like everybody puts, we like to, have this image of movie making as kind of like a, elite, leisurely, almost or luxurious kind of
Yep.
pursuit. But there are so many, people involved in the actual hard work of getting like, real, like it goes beyond a 9 to 5. Like
Yes.
this is
Yeah.
crunch time for
Yeah.
so many people.
Mm-hmm.
And they do it obviously because they love it and it's their passion. And talking with the editors of the films, especially, like I talked with a lot of the editors, and I feel like you really get a great sense of how a film comes to, like that's the people you want to
Yes.
talk to in terms of like actually how things come together.
Yes.
And this, yeah, I mean just to hear their commitment, but also like to listen to their stories of time crunches that they were up against, because the studios set these movies with their release dates years in advance, and so much is riding on making those deliverable dates, in terms of marketing and whatever. Like it's very calculated.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you just gotta push, like you gotta
Yeah.
push hard.
Well,
And they realize it. I mean, that's what they signed up for. But
for
it's
sure.
still yeah, to hear like about marathon editing sessions that like start on a Sunday and you don't leave the cutting room till like the Thursday.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, you basically live there. They should just build like little cubbies for people to sleep in. I think it was
Yeah,
also
yeah.
the film from like, I think it was at CinemaCon, they announced they were doing the presentation for 6, and they announced 7 would be coming out a year after, and
Right.
that was like
Yeah.
a real big of shitstorm. So,
Yeah, and there was a report like around that time, like of James Wan, who was directing 7, like
Mhm.
basically like begging Universal, like give me like just a few more weeks before I need to start shooting, because like
Mhm.
it's like too much. And they were like, no,
Mhm.
get it to it. And then of course like there's, and I kind of flick at this in the book, like then there's the monkey paw kind of situation. It was like, oh, you want more time, do you? Well, okay, I'll, then Paul Walker will die mid-production, and then you'll have way more time than you ever would have wanted.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's
So
the thing.
yeah, so they never did end up doing that less than a year turnaround
Sure.
because of
Yeah,
that situation.
because of the
But
situation. But
they,
still, to
and
even be asked to do that, like that's
oh yeah,
wild, right?
unless, yeah, I mean, to have a year between installments that were not shot
Exactly.
back to back,
Hmm.
is pretty unheard of. So the
Yeah.
fact that they were even trying to do that
Yeah.
was crazy. But but then you see like the demands of commerce that play out in these films. Like they're so hot, and the studio wants an immediate like return on investment, and like to sequelize it and to like catch that lightning in a bottle while it's still there. And to do that and then like wait 2 years, like it is a risk, because
Yeah.
maybe in that interim people will move on to another thing, or they will get bored, or
Yeah. Well,
who knows what happens. So you see why they want to do it, but it's
mhm.
very tricky to do.
Happens in movies. It happens in television now too, especially, right? So
Right,
with
yeah.
just massive
And
delays between.
yeah, like look at Stranger Things, right?
I
Like
know,
it's been
exactly.
like, I feel like it's been the first season aired 20 years ago or something. I don't know. Like we were
Yeah,
all in high
absolutely.
school.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and they were very young, and now they're very adult people.
Yeah.
So,
The-
we're talking about Vin Diesel. I enjoy your perspective on him in this book. He's a bit of a visionary. He's got some. He's an agent of chaos at times. He's a true believer.
Mhm.
Through all of your sort of like kind of delving in, how do you see him different now? Like, do you see him different in any way?
I feel I do, and kind of the comparison that I kind of stumbled onto, but the more I think about it, the more apt it feels. Is like I feel he's like the our modern day contemporary Sylvester Stallone.
It's
Like
a great comparison. Yeah.
like not only in their like kind of like vocal intonations and kind of sometimes monosyllabic
Yeah.
performances,
Yeah.
um, but Stallone started off as like a painter. Like he considers himself a visual artist at heart, a
Yeah.
sensitive soul who's like a sensitive guy in the trapped in the soul of a bruiser. And I feel like Vin, and Sly wrote his own way into the system. Like he wrote
Hmm.
Rocky as like, and he wouldn't give up the rights to it. Like he wanted to star in it. And Vin was kind of the same thing. Like he's a New York guy. Like he grew up in a very artistic household, and I feel like just through pure self determination and wit and will, he wrote himself his own ticket. He made a short film. He made his own film. He auditioned like crazy, and he got it. And because of that, he's so like protective of the character of Dom and the thing that he has built, and he has built it,
Hmm.
not by himself, but
No.
an integral part of it. Um, and I can see, I can understand why he has the reputation of being so controlling and micromanaging and demanding, and like, rewriting scripts at the last minute, or like, in a fight scene, like, I don't know about that elbow move. Like, can we talk about that, the motivation behind that elbow thing for like 2 hours? I get it. I get it. And I feel like he's built this thing, and I have great respect. And he has a screen presence like no other actor of his stature. Um, so I always was fascinated by him on screen, but
Yeah.
I have a respect for him. At the
Yeah.
same time, also listening to a lot of stories about just how he would not show the greatest respect for his coworkers, in terms of like just being constantly late and not
Hmm.
valuing people's time, um, is also hard to hear,
Yeah.
and creates a complicated portrait of somebody. And I feel, we're all complicated, but once
Hmm.
you get to that level of superstar moviedom, it's extremely complicated, and
Yeah.
you have to have a certain inflated sense of self and ego to make that happen.
Yeah.
And by many accounts, that is the case.
Yeah.
So, I love what he's doing. I love what he's done. Maybe he can figure out a way to be a little bit more courteous and
Sure.
conscientious
Well, I
of
love.
other people.
I think what I love about your perspective on Vin is it's not disrespectful. It's very respectful. It's kind of like the myth versus reality mentality around him,
Right.
and I love that you also like really do hold him accountable for what people have said about his ethic, so that if by chance he does come across this book and he reads it, which I think he will, he understands that there might be some perspective of, again, it's not about like someone attacking him. It's about someone saying like you could do better because people respect you and appreciate you, that you should do better, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
it's again that myth versus reality, the outside versus the inside, his outward facing to the public when he's on Vinbook and all of these
Mhm,
things,
mhm.
and then who he is and what his work ethic is, that reality, I think that holds him accountable and really does paint a picture of him, again, like you said, being really, really conscientious and very forward thinking about all of the little details within the story, within the characters, and so on and so forth. But then bringing that in on another level, for his family, as he says,
Yeah.
right? That is his family. um you mentioned it, Paul Walker passing halfway through the production of Seven. For me, Paul Walker and Vin Diesel are the complete package of what makes the Fast and the Furious so successful.
Completely.
Even just the two of them, they're a family, with everything else around them, like the way they've come together through these movies and following them. You did interview quite a few people talking about Paul. In your own words, like, what do you think Paul Walker's legacy, true legacy with it, is within this Fast family, outside of everything that's happened?
I mean, I think, talking with people about Paul, you could say that there's like a halo effect because he's no longer with us and people want to say good things. But even in digging in the archival material, what people would say about Paul when he was alive, like, he's just a universally beloved guy. This was a he was a he was kind of a reluctant star. He really saw making movies as a means to an end in order to live the life
Was
that he
work. Yeah.
wanted to live. Yeah, like
Yeah.
he was happiest in the ocean, or surfing. That was his zen place, as his mother once said. And movies allowed him to do that. They allowed him to go to exotic places and have fun, and bring his friends and provide for his family and provide for those who he cared about. um, he was not as all in building this thing as Vin was. And he also had a very different energy. Like, he was the epitome of like the relaxed, California surfer guy, like, just same broad dude, and like, just walking around in flip-flops and ripped jeans, and if he was wearing a shirt at all. um, and he approached movie making as almost like it was fun. It was like a
Mhm.
hobby,
Yeah.
and he was good at it, and he
Mhm.
took it seriously. But it wasn't the be all and end all for him. Whereas Vin, I feel, is very much the opposite. Like, movie making and art is his life, or
For sure.
is his drive,
It's his
and
legacy in a
it's
lot of
his
ways, right?
legacy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think Paul more perhaps thought his legacy of what he was leaving behind, like the impression and impact he made on those around him,
Yeah, his
like
family, his
on
daughter.
people's
He was so
lives.
he
Yeah,
was
his
so
family.
passionate about his
And
daughter.
he was a very charitable person too. Like,
Yeah,
he started this charity for children who were
that's right.
affected by disasters, natural disasters. And so, but I feel like the differences in those two guys only helped when they were on screen, because it's so dependent on that, like, yin and yang kind of, dynamic, to really bring those characters to life. And it was evident right in the first film. Like, you have, Vin playing Dom, who's like a harder edge kind of person who keeps things in, and you can tell he's just like, trying to reckon his soul with his purpose. And then you have Paul, who's like, just like, he's a cop, and he just like wants to bring down bad guys and like do cool shit. And they come together. And that was what made the film so special. What was their energy. And I feel that was a mirror, in a way, of their real life dynamic.
Hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I do feel like, though, collectively, like, the fact that Vin Diesel has been really pushing and wanting to continue this franchise after Paul Walker's death, the strength isn't there anymore, in my opinion, right? Like, Seven was it. And even I was worried about Seven, given the fact that they were only going to be using him for half of it and was really going to kill him off, but they ended up keeping him. And how they handled it wasn't as bad as I had thought it would have been. It was very
Right.
emotional. I bawled my eyes out at the end of that movie when they pulled away. And that song will always stay as being like one of the most biggest moments. But
Oh yeah.
I've always felt like I get the idea of wanting to do this for the fans, and maybe Paul would want the series to go on. You could say that, but the series was nothing without the two of them. And what's happened now with this series by pushing Brian to the
Mm.
side
Mhm.
and that he's babysitting, it just feels like they're dragging this on longer than it should have, and they're trying to pivot and switch things up. And I don't think Vin is really respecting Paul Walker's legacy by doing this. I think he's really just trying to, again, keep the franchise going because it's the thing that is his legacy. Like you said, like his legacy is that. And I wish that he himself, Vin Diesel, would make that call and say, We're done." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
after 7, that was it. And, reboot the series, give it some time and reboot. And maybe the kids of the original Fast are now part of this new generation of Fast. Like,
Right.
there's an opportunity there, and he could still be a part of it and help tell those stories and continue that legacy. But I feel like Brian was such a grounded element in this series that everything after just has fallen short of what the past movies were really all about. And yeah, like Vin has got an ego. We know that. We talked. There's a lot of people that have talked about it and whatnot. And you know, a lot of people have been kind of referencing out of your book, the feud, if you will, between Vin Diesel and Dwayne Johnson
Right.
when he joined Fast Five. Um, you know, I wanted to ask you, like, based on what you've kind of learned, and if there was anything that kind of came out of it, because there's been a lot of people that have been actually like referencing it as of late since the book has been out, like just talking about that portion of it. But in your own words, like, how much of that tension of their tension was ego, or how much of it was just simply two different styles of working? Because like people perceive it as ego. I definitely did, but I
Yeah.
also kind of looked at it as like, maybe this is just a working ethic thing. I'm not sure.
I think it's a mix of both.
Hmm.
And as I kind of write in the book, like there were certain instances or incidents along the way that did not help uh, solidify that friendship, or maybe helped rather in driving a wedge between those two men.
Hmm.
But again, I kind of come back to the Stallone comparison, and the I feel like Vin is Stallone, Dwayne is Schwarzenegger. Like they're two alpha guys,
Yeah.
and you get them into the same space, and there's not enough space necessarily to hold both of those men and their
Hmm.
outsized images.
Hmm.
And Dwayne is very much, I feel like, more the crowd pleaser. He's like the cocky guy who's like always trying to be charming and make everybody smile, and goes out of his way to like know your name on set and
Hmm.
know your sister-in-law's name and know that that sister-in-law has a babysitter who loves the WWE, and get her on the phone and I'll talk to her for 20 minutes or something like that. Like there was a reputation that Dwayne developed immediately within the Fast films of just like being everything for everyone,
Hmm.
and being kind of a consummate professional of knowing his lines, knowing where he needed to be, knowing when he needed to be there, and not wasting anybody's time.
And probably showing
It,
up on time, right?
yeah, and but especially not wasting his own time, because he is such a deal maker, and because he's got like a dozen different irons in the fire at any one time. Like he's filming Fast, and then on a break, he's like calling and making a commercial deal or something like that. And it's just not the same on Vin. Like this Fast is everything, more or less. So I feel it was different ways of working, and it
Yeah.
was the ego thing.
Hmm.
And we can see, some people, when the feud was kind of exploded into public view on Eight during the making of Eight, when
Yeah.
when Dwayne made his Instagram post accusing Diesel, well, not naming Diesel, but saying he had problems with some of his male co-stars who were candy asses, in his words. Um, and it didn't take, a lot of people I spoke with were like, well, it didn't take us long to figure out which
Who he's
candy
talking
ass
to?
he was referring to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was a speculation at the time, was like, well, is this like kind of just like marketing? Is this like kind of just getting a feud for good headlines and driving, and there's no doubt that the real life tension bled into the character tension, which is what you want,
Yes.
because they're always, or typically they're on different sides of the kind of fight.
Hmm.
But at the same time, we've seen reconciliation in a way there was a period where Dwayne was like, I'm never making these movies again. Don't even talk to me about it. Like, come on. And then lo and behold, we see him make a cameo at the end of Fast X.
Yeah.
And then after that movie comes out, he posted an Instagram story saying like, Hobbs is coming back for like another movie.
Yeah.
So, money talks, I guess you can kind of put the end
For sure.
of it.
Yeah.
And then we've seen, it's always, from my perspective, it's always seemed like Vin loves Dwayne like maybe a little one-sidedly, or more than perhaps Dwayne loves Vin. Like,
right.
It's always been Dwayne who's kind of like saying like, I can't deal with this. This is too much. Well, Vin's like, come on, come back, be part of the family. I love you, brother. And, we saw just last week or just a couple of days ago, Vin post on Vinstagram, a loving tribute to Dwayne's performance in The Smashing Machine.
Yeah.
And, you can only read that as like, come on.
He's buttering him up.
He's definitely buttering him up.
He's trying to
butter him up.
Yeah. He's playing to his ego, right? Like
exactly,
he's playing to his ego and saying, yeah.
Diesel knows what he's doing. Like he's very canny he's always been very smart about this.
For sure.
And he does it in this way that feels as unmanufactured as something like this could possibly be.
For sure.
His social media presence is so authentic.
Yes.
It is very much him behind the keyboard of those,
Yeah. Yes.
Interestingly composed sentences.
Yep.
With their unique sense of grammar and punctuation.
For sure.
That and that helps. So that's how he's built his community of fans. Yeah.
Well, I didn't realize that he had like the most followers on Vinbook or Facebook at one point in time. Like he had like millions and millions, right? So
back in the day, he was one of the first, big celebrities to hop onto Facebook and recognize the power it had could have. Mm-hmm. And, he's today, I believe, Johnson kind of dwarfs him in the social media followings across all the various channels, but Vin's influence in that sphere is not to be underestimated.
Yeah, it shows the power of social media, like you said, for celebrities and for this idea of building followers and building, community around it. Yeah, like I honestly also perceived it like just behind the scenes before reading your book, this Vin Dwayne thing. It's just being like they're almost too much the same. You know what I mean? Like their egos will like overlap, right? And like we were talking about at the top, where Vin's off the cuff saying, yeah, they want us, Universal wants us to make, 2 more movies after this. Dwayne has had his own instances where he is talking off the cuff without any real sort of studio approval or anything that's in it, that's actually greenlit or written down.
Yes. Yeah.
Look at Black Adam and what happened with that.
Right. Yes. We're going to remake the DC universe in his image.
Yeah. Exactly. And that just really didn't amass anything. And now he's pivoted entirely away from that. So
I feel like both of the men are at very interesting points in their career. Cause Vin has really stalled. Like he's still trying to get the sequel to Fast up on, get it going and get sequels to all of his other properties going. Like he's been talking about a Riddick sequel forever. He's been talking about, a new Xander Cage thing pops up now and then.
Wow.
And, Dwayne is of course like, he going into this fall season, he was like, I'm tired of being pigeonholed as this big action guy, which he himself has
admitted.
And serious stuff, Smashing Machine, and I'm going to be a real actor. And then Smashing Machine doesn't really do what he was hoping it to do. And then he's like, Jumanji 3, baby, we're back. I was like, what?
Well, he's doing another Benny Safdie film, I've heard, right? Honestly, like when I think of his career, like I like that he shifted to doing Smashing Machine and trying something different. It's not going to be perfect right off the cuff. Like the guy has only really stepped into a dramatic role once, if you really
I mean, I think I think The Rock or Dwayne Johnson is a tremendous actor. Like, and I thought he was great in The Smashing Machine, and I do like The Smashing Machine, and I thought he was wonderful in Pain and Gain.
Yes, oh my
back
God,
in the
he was
days.
so good in that. Yeah.
Southland Tales, I thought he was great. Like he's a good actor.
He's a great actor. Yeah,
is given the appropriate material, and he can stretch himself. Like I'm not just saying he's like a good action star. I'm saying he's genuinely a good actor.
I've been a longtime Rock fan. I obviously grew up with wrestling, and so I've followed his career, and I've always wanted to see him step out of, as you know, the pigeonhole, the box that he built for himself, that I think he stayed very comfortable with. So I was excited for him to do that, because like, even like Dwayne's he's an injection into any franchise. He did it for Fast and Furious, and it was a welcomed addition to the family. But also, like you said, money talks. Money talks, and I loved in this book, you know, you kind of get into the economics around like Fast 10 and sort of the chaos around like the budget, the global premieres, salaries for the cast. I want to ask you this, and it's not just general to, it's not specific to just Fast, but it might be just general to this whole idea of franchises. At what point does a franchise become too big to succeed, do you think?
I mean, like Fast X kind of tipped over that point.
Yeah.
You know, like some reports, yeah, pegged it as costing like $450 million to
With
make.
marketing?
No, without marketing.
What? Oh
Which
my
would,
God.
yeah, which would make it like one of the most, if not the most expensive movie ever made. You know, I'd have to triple check that, but
Yeah.
so it's, yeah, so like your box office is not going to be commensurate unless
Yeah.
you have to gross like $1 billion+
Mhm.
theatrically to get
Yes.
that there. And you know, you just think of like all the hard work and energy that goes into this. Like, okay, are you doing this all to break even or maybe make like 100 million? Like, you need something that the margins need to be wider,
Mhm.
for the return on investment to really make sense. And yeah, you know, so there was a lot of talk after Fast X came out and, you know, underperformed theatrically, certainly in North America, that these movies, if they're going to go forward, they need to slim down their production budgets by like at least $100 million and stuff like that.
Or
But at the
more.
same time, or more.
Yeah.
At the same time, you know, because the mantra of the Fast franchise has always been like bigger and better, is, you know, they just kept on adding like more
Mhm.
stars and more locations and more, you know, outrageous set pieces.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had somebody say like, you know, you add so many A-listers in there, and we're not talking. You were talking about the core cast, and then, you know, 10 also has like Jason Statham. It's got Charlize Theron. It's got Jason Momoa. It's, you know, they had The Rock in there for a little bit. Like Alan Richson, Brie Larson. Like, you just like keep adding and adding and adding. You know, it's going to cost so much money before a single frame of footage is even shot.
Mhm.
That,
They've spent
yeah,
they've
it's
spent
you
millions
tip it
already.
over.
Yeah.
You tip it
Yeah, you
over.
tipped it over. I do think it's a growing issue with the industry, though, that so
Totally.
much money is being thrown at some of these big movies as a return on investment that they'll get it back in theaters, and they're just underperforming. No studio seems to really be acknowledging or adapting to the growing change of the industry. You know what I mean? Like, we
Hmm.
saw it this summer with some of the big tentpole Marvel movies and, you know, other films, right? Like, I think the only one that will probably perform and surprise people is going to be Avengers Doomsday, with all the hype and the big scale that it's going to have. But even some of these other movies, like the MCU films and stuff like that, or even Disney films, some of them have underperformed because there's been so much thrown at it, and they're just not getting that return on investment globally,
Yeah,
even, right?
yeah.
Like,
I mean, I think, you know, I think like Avatar, which is coming out, you know, soon, will
yep,
be kind of a test of that. You know, those are not cheap movies to make, but
sure,
as we've seen, like those movies also have like incredible legs. Like,
yeah,
it just, you know, people keep going to them throughout. And yeah, like Doomsday is going to be, I think, the real test. You know, we've been saying like every Marvel this movie this summer or this year has been a test. Fantastic Four,
yeah,
Thunderbolts, whatever, and those tests have not gone well.
no,
So if something like Doomsday, which is really like throwing everything into the pot, like every ingredient in
hmm,
their kitchen is going into that thing. If that doesn't work, that is the end. That is the end of comic book movies for a generation, and that might be the end of just like the big, huge budget, you know.
I
Uh,
think that's it. Yeah,
yeah. So it's, so we'll see where fast wherever it goes next fits into that
yeah.
equation. But I cannot imagine it would look or feel as big and, you know, needlessly big as Fast X did.
No, for sure. And also, like, when Vin recently, I can't remember what event it was. I think it was in like Vegas, or maybe it was in LA, where he was on stage and he was touting about, you know, they're
Yeah,
going back to the
it was in
streets.
LA. It was I think it was a Fuel Fest event.
Yeah, okay,
And
yes.
so yeah, he was like saying like, he was saying whether this is actually true or not. Only Vin and Universal know. Is like Universal came to me and they want more fast. I told them only on 3 conditions. I'm paraphrasing here, of course,
Yeah.
but like, take it back to the streets of LA.
Yeah.
Make it about the car culture.
Yeah.
And we're bringing Brian back. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. 2 of those 3 sounded good.
Yeah.
But he hasn't said how they intend to do that. I don't think he is talking about recasting the role, which would be kind of insane.
But that's what I'm saying. Again, going back to
So
what I was saying before, it just feels like all of this is just a disservice to the memory of Paul Walker.
totally, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
to say that you're going to bring Brian back, what are you going to do? Are you recasting him? Disrespectful. You're going
yeah.
to CGI his face onto his brother's body again for an entire movie?
Even worse. Yeah. So, we can look back at 7 and say like, okay, the family was very heavily like Universal, like very much to the credit, like during when 7 happened or when when his death happened, they were like, okay, we don't know what we are going to do. We need to let everybody grieve. We need to let the family deal with whatever the impact is on that. And if the family doesn't want to do it, we're not going to do it. Like, they needed the family buy-in, and they waited for that, and they got it. And the family very much did want to continue. And okay, but at the same time, and it was like everybody's headspace was in a tizzy. But now we're 12 years later after that, and Paul has no voice. Like, he cannot speak for what he would want. And it goes a long way to say, if the family wants, like, if the family does approve of this digital reconstitution, or however they go about it, that's one thing. But at the same time, Paul Walker is not here, and he cannot. And I think most fans are in agreement with you and I in that they don't want to see a digital, like, an AI Paul Walker walking around.
Yeah,
driving a car.
I am happy that they didn't kill him in 7 and like do something along those lines to like get rid of him so that his character didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think, like, bringing him back in a CGI form for whatever story, you know what I mean? Like, even just that little moment, I think it was in the last film where the car pulls up.
That's at the end of 9.
9, yeah, sorry. At the end of 9, the car pulls up and like Brian's there. Like, it's tongue in cheek, but like, obviously, but like, it's just, again, it's just getting really messy, especially with Jordana's character being involved in things. Like, she should also be a side character.
Like, why are you here and not
Brian?
No offense to Mia.
Yeah, no,
and
Mia's
I mean,
great.
like, it all goes back to, it's like, it's this strange balance they've had to work. And like, you think about the end of 8, where Dom names his son Brian. Little Brian was like, why are you doing this? Yes. Brian is alive.
Yeah, exactly.
It's traditional to name, if you're naming somebody, it would be after somebody who died.
It just shows that they don't understand how to handle his character post.
Or
his
they're
death,
just like,
right?
they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, right? Like,
that's very true. That is very true.
And I get it, and I do like the way that Furious 7 ended.
Mm-hmm.
It has such a unique ending, like unprecedented in cinematic history.
Yeah,
and it also has, and it is 100% dependent on a dialogue with the audience that is unspoken. Like, if you were an alien and you dropped into planet Earth and watched the end of this movie, and you understood English and you understood cinematic language, okay, whatever. Yeah. But you'd be like, what is this? What is going on? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
But because everybody who went to see it understood, it made sense. But it's been pushing it. It's been pushing it to say, like, Brian's off to the side. So I don't know. Like, my hope would be, the next one kind of closes the whole saga without bringing Brian into the mix. You can mention him. You can say he's doing whatever. And I would still like to see Jordana Brewster.
Yes, she should be there. She should be there to close out.
She should be there. Yeah. I mean, it and you saw they were wrestling with that in 8 again, because she's not in that. She's not in 8.
Right. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's tricky. I don't envy the decision making that they have to do, but at the same time, like, please don't make that bad decision.
Right. Because I don't think it'll go over well.
No.
Well, it's good that I was going to ask you what your insight was for the future of the franchise. So it's like, yeah, like, it needs to close out. How that does? Do you think you think it could be like rebooted, revived, or remixed in any way for future?
Totally. Yeah. I think you give it like 5 years or so,
Yeah.
maybe more, maybe even less.
Hmm.
And you do it just as you said, next generation style.
Hmm.
You do it little Brian and his friends as like, teenagers or 20 somethings,
Hmm.
and they get into their own, shenanigans, and they're like mentored by like an older, wiser Han or somebody, like just stick
I
around.
would rather Han than Vin,
Yeah,
but I could see
I know.
Vin
Yeah,
being the producer, right? So
I know. Maybe he pops up here or there or
yeah,
something. But uh, Han's such a beloved character that people would
yeah,
have more buy-in for that. I feel, in as fans, and I just love to see more Sun Kang than I do.
yeah.
So I mean, that would be that. I think that's kind of the obvious way to go about it.
Hmm.
And if whatever comes next, like they do have to close it out. And I really do think, especially that now that Vin's legal troubles have kind of been put behind him,
Hmm.
more or less,
Hmm.
that they will make a finale, because that did end on quite a to be continued
Well,
note.
yeah, like we had Gal Gadot's character returning. We
Oh,
had like
we had either like characters returning from the dead or characters like facing their imminent death. Like there's like a jet with like half the cast like that crashed
oh,
into a
that's right.
mountain.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I
And
forgot about that.
then
I
we
gotta
have
rewatch all
Vin
these.
and little Brian staring down like a just wall of destruction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then we have Michelle Rodriguez and Cypher in the Arctic with, hey, Gal Gadot's alive now, and we still don't know what's going on with Kurt Russell. Like, yeah, there's a lot of open questions. So.
Yeah, so like I don't think it didn't make sense that he was like they want to push for like going back to the streets, because it just like there's so much that's left up in the air
I mean,
from 10.
you just like, need to like resolve that in the first 5 minutes, and they're like, oh, now we're back home,
Back in the streets. Yeah,
back in
exactly.
the
Yeah.
streets.
Coronas and are
Glad we
popping.
survived all that
Exactly.
insanity.
Well, listen, we're getting to the end here. I have one last question
Yes.
before we close things out. You know, you've spent so much time with this, living in this world, as you said, 170 interviews, just to help kind of really flesh out the behind the scenes of this franchise, and an inside perspective into the industry for yourself. Like, if you were to think of something that you would want people to take away from Welcome to the Family, what would you what would you hope that it is?
I think it would be, that this franchise, which is so obviously financially successful, and has made such a deep impact on the economics of Hollywood, but I feel that it has not been given the due respect it deserves in the culture at large for what
Right.
it has accomplished, and what those films are really about, and what they're trying to say, and the ideas contained therein, and the innovations contained therein. I guess I would basically love for anybody who has, heard or thought of the Fast and Furious franchise as like a lunkhead kind of meat and potatoes, summer blockbuster that they don't have to think about too hard or pay attention to give it a little bit of a second thought and a little bit more consideration, and learn about what these massively creative people went through to make these films, and how they have, in more ways than one, made a deep impact on the culture at large.
Mhm. Yeah, I think your book absolutely does that, and in a way that like it just brought me back to the idea of like when I studied visual arts, and I minored in film studies, and we would read a lot of introspective journals and books on genres and on films, and this book just took me there. It just
Mm,
reminded me of those times when I would read those kind of books and get this new perspective on a movie that I never thought about.
right.
Like, I just never
Yeah.
thought about that perspective. And I've, as someone who obviously like yourself is like, you actually like work in this industry, as someone who's is dabbling in this, and doing a podcast and learning so much more behind the scenes. I knew about some of it, but some of it was so eye-opening and so enlightening, and it really does highlight that, like, to the point, there's not some deep origin story to this franchise. It literally started as a small summer blockbuster that blew up into this epic global phenomenon, and it has like really deep, humble beginnings that aren't, a comic book or just books or something like that. This was like something that started as an article and blew up into a whole global phenomenon. And yeah, I think this book, Welcome to the Family, absolutely nails that. And I'm so fortunate to have read it. And I'm so fortunate to have you on the Geek-Centric podcast. Thank you so much, Barry, for joining us and
Oh,
answering my
pleasure.
questions. We're running over time. I really do appreciate it. I as a fan of the franchise, and I know that you're a fan, because I think there's also this misconception, like you said, like lunkheads or like just people who like fast cars are going to like this franchise.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think there's also a misconception that maybe it's a low brow for film critics. So to have someone as esteemed as yourself, who's been working in this industry as a film critic for so long, to kind of bring this to the forefront and talk about it in a very, fan first way, it's very welcoming. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show to talk about it.
Thank you.
In a lot of ways, man. So I really do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Well, you are vying for the title of my favorite Justin in the world. So it's between you and Lynn.
Oh, well, you know what? No, it's okay, man. I know Justin Lin. He's my favorite Justin too, in a lot of ways. But look, thanks again. And as we mentioned, the book is available now. Can you find it in bookstores? You can't find it physically.
You can find it in anywhere you buy books. It's in for Canadian listeners. It's in Indigos across the country. It'll be
Awesome.
at your independent retailer. There's an audiobook available wherever you get your audiobooks, narrated by me. So if you like these dulcet tones that you've been listening to for the past hour and a half, I got good news for you. And also as a ebook. So any way you buy books, anywhere you're comfortable buying your books,
sure,
it'll be there.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to put some details in the show notes of where people can buy it on Amazon, buy it as an ebook, and I'm going to do it as a audiobook, because I love audiobooks. It was a great read, so definitely go check it out. Barry, thank you again, man.
Oh, thank you.